Like I love drawing comics, doing 3D, all this goofy stuff that we do in my business. I do this stuff because I love it. I do this stuff because, you know, it's I'm an artist. But first and foremost, I was a comic book fan as a kid. I love comics. I've always loved comics. Comics have just been a part of my life for as long as I've been on this rock. And so there's this thing, though, that I notice, you know, life kind of happens, time goes by, and I sort of wandered away from really keeping up with the comic book world. Back in the 90s, I drew comics for a living for a few years, and then I kind of wandered from that into things like storyboarding and animation and other things that are kind of comic related, but weren't comics themselves. And when I did that, I sort of lost track of a lot of the industry part of comics, and which wasn't a bad thing, because the comic book industry can be horrible. I mean, it's a cutthroat, really weird world, and it can be very tough. And I didn't miss that part of it at all. But one of the things that I did kind of miss out on was a lot of the changeover from the way comics used to be in the late 80s and early 90s, really through kind of the digital revolution and all the stuff with comics moving online, a lot of online sales. And so there's a lot of stuff there that I kind of missed out on. And it seems like the comic book industry kind of reinvented itself a couple of times in the time since I was sort of in it full time as a professional, and now. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's life happens, and you move on and you do things and all that. And I never stopped drawing comics and comic pages, loving comic art and all that kind of stuff. Just, you know, I explored a lot of other things. Well, in the last few years, you know, it has become more available for me, more of a thing where, you know, you become established, you're able to start kind of branching back out and having fun and doing other things. And so I started working back toward the comic book business. And I did a lot of work kind of in and around comics through those years, just not on comics specifically, on specific titles or anything. And so as I come back, you know, I've become much more active, going to comic shops, going to comic shows, looking at books and things that are on the shelves, looking at stuff online and seeing what all I can find. And there's a lot of interesting stuff online, but I see the problem online as being there's actually so much that it's hard to drill through it all and find really cool stuff. So, you know, I think it becomes a thing where you start to look for some gatekeepers there. You look for some folks who are going to point you to the interesting stuff. On comic book shop shelves, though, which in kind of my first stop as kind of an old comic book guy is to go to a shop and ask questions, look around the shelves, just strike up conversations. Because I mean, it's always been a fun thing just to kind of hang out at the stores and explore that way. But what I have found after a couple of years of trying that is that while it's still something I do and still something I enjoy, I really don't find that many new things on comic book shop shelves that are interesting. You know, there's your Marvel and your DC that are going to take up the bulk of the space. And I find that a real shame, because what they offer is kind of the same regurgitated stuff they've been doing forever. DC a little less so than Marvel. DC has some folks doing some interesting things there on a few titles. I mean, and there's quality artwork in most of it. I mean, in most of that stuff, the artwork is pretty high caliber. It's at the very least, it's high caliber in a professional sort of way. I would say there's not a lot of it that strikes me as particularly inspired, but it's clean and it's professional, so at least there's that. But I'm not seeing a lot of independent stuff, you know, really showcased on those shelves outside of maybe, you know, Image. And there's a handful of small companies who do show up on those shelves. And so sometimes, you know, sometimes I'll find some of that stuff and I want to share it. I want to, you know, kind of give it whatever little moment of exposure that I can, because I want that stuff to thrive. So anyway, Also, sometimes, every once in a while, I'll find something online that I'll buy direct from a creator, because that's a cool thing that we get to do a lot more of now. And so I finally just thought about it. I picked up a bunch of books today that I've been meaning to grab. And I figured I would just kind of pop up a video and share it, and kind of give these folks a little bit of a nod on my little channel here. And so anyway, I'm going to start off with two comics here that are from well done, whatever. I mean, dude's name is Weldon. His last name is Weldon, and this is a new comic. It's completely it's as indie as a comic can get, but it's called Harland Buck Free Sword. And I'm gonna hold this up for a second so you can see it. Okay, and to be honest, the cover of issues 1 and 2, the covers themselves, they struck me in an odd sort of way. Like, I was like, well, that's clean and kind of interesting looking, and the artwork kind of reminded me a little, had like some hints of old Walt Simonson in it. And it intrigued me. I would say, from a completely just a really brass knuckles kind of view, the covers on these books are the weakest part of the books. The covers are good, they're okay, but once you crack these things open, like, I don't even know why I actually clicked on the stuff to go look at it on dude's website, but I did. And I was like, that's a weird name for a comic. And the artwork was just solid enough that I was like, okay, I'll go take a peek at this. And I fully expected to be less than impressed. And the thing is, when I went and I looked at the sample that was online, the sample of the interior art and the interior pages was just, like here's a couple of these pages. And what I found was really dynamic storytelling, rock solid, great work. I mean, the pencils, inks, awesome, colors are solid. The writing is off the charts good. Like this is, dude is printing this through, looks like Comics Wellspring, because they put an ad for the printer on the back. It's that indie, and yet, I mean, it is top tier. Like, Marvel and DC only wish they were doing books this good. The writing and artwork in it are off the charts good. You need to get these books. Go look it up. It's at let's see, www.weldon studio.com. And in the order, when I placed the order, there's a little card that came with it. So thanks so much for choosing our comic class. Hope you enjoy reading as much as we did making it. Keep making comics, and of course signed by the dude. But right here, hopefully this shows up, www.weldonstudios.com. And so go check this out. These guys are awesome and super cool, dude. I actually, it's indie enough that they're very accessible. And I spoke with Scott Weldon, the writer and creator of this. Spoke with him for a bit on Facebook one day after I got these, and it was just like, wow, these are amazing, and this dude is super cool. So yeah, you want these books. You want these. Let's pop these back out so that don't have the glare on them quite so hard. But Harland Buck Free Sword. It's stylistically, it's kind of it takes me back to old, like, John Buscema era Conan, and it's fantasy. It's like hard, realistic sort of fantasy. I can't say much more about it than that, other than, it's like the first story is a 2-issue story. It's a very tight, small scale story, which I actually dig, because unlike all these efforts people put into trying to go super epic right out of the gate. This gives you this tight little story that's just a look at the characters. The two main characters, Harlan Buck and this other character you're introduced to along the way. It gives you a great, tight look at those characters, and it's just so good. Like, I was blown away. I probably read them 3 times each because they're just so damn good. So there's that. Harlan Buck, Free Sword. Go to weldonstudios.com and get those books. They're awesome. Then the other thing, and I was lax on following up with these. I bought the first issue of this, and then I just picked up issues 2, 3, and 4 today and finished reading them. And holy crap, this is so good. And everybody I talked to, I haven't spoken to anyone else who's actually read this, and I think that's a shame, just a travesty. Now, full disclosure, I am originally from Eastern Kentucky. I am an Appalachia boy. And so when I saw on the shelves a comic titled Warlords of Appalachia, I had to look. And I looked, I was cringing as I picked this up off the shelves, thinking, dear God, how many times do I have to hear or read or see stupid stereotypes about Appalachian people? How bad is this going to be? And I actually picked this up almost snarling in expectation of something that was going to piss me completely off. Cracked it open. First couple pages were actually pretty interesting. And the premise of the story, once I got the premise, I thought, oh, I have to check this out. So I bought it. The premise of this story, it is a post-apocalyptic, sort of post-apocalyptic story where there has been a second American Civil War. And basically you have this representation of the federal government, which it was like the way this is described, they don't go into a great detail about the war. And I actually like that. They leave a lot for you to figure out. But what I gather from the story is it's divided into a north and south-ish kind of environment, with the north being, again, very much federal government forcing the south to stick in place with it. And apparently, from what I gather from the context of it, the South loses again. And it's a different environment this time. This time it's not a war over slavery and stuff like that. This is just, we're going to keep you. And it looks like a lot of really harsh sort of political stuff involved there. It was really neat to kind of see that portrayed in a comic. First off, I was very intrigued by that. And then of course the thing that was kind of rebellious Kentucky pride coming out in me that they really tapped, and I love this, is the story takes place after all that has happened, and the South is lost again, basically. And there is one holdout, and that is the state of Kentucky. And it's the holdout from a tyrannical North. There's like this real fascist sort of guy running the show there, and Kentucky is the holdout. And there's a lot of reasons why it actually makes sense for Kentucky to be the holdout. There's a lot of similarities, like thinking about the mountains and the landscape and culture of it. There's a lot of reasons why Kentucky makes sense to be, and Appalachia in general makes sense to be the holdout in that kind of situation. So there's also, there's science. It's a science fiction story, so there's some cyborgs and stuff in it. There's all kinds of cool stuff in it. And it's interesting because it doesn't take itself too seriously to be fun. I was kind of worried about that because there's some real heady sorts of topics involved in the backstory of it, and it could have gone overboard with that to the point that it became potentially preachy and problematic and not fun. But it manages to stay fun while at the same time it it actually treats, there's actually nice chunks of Appalachian culture embedded in the story. The characters are represented really well. It gives nods to some of the stereotypes, but in a way that shows an understanding of why they exist and what the realities are behind them. And as someone who comes from that background, it's really intriguing to see someone actually deal with that. I feel like the folks who made this have to be either from the region or they did their research. Because otherwise it's just sheer luck that they blundered into such a representation that is really so solid. But it's a solid representation. It's a great story. I mean, beyond that, beyond just the obvious, obviously I'm an Appalachian boy. It was cool to see that, and I loved that part of it. But beyond that, just moving that aside, it's great. Like artistically, the art inside the book is really, really good. It's a little more, I'm not sure how to characterize it, because I come from loving like comics from the late 80s, early 90s, Image, and stuff like that. I like a lot of the big over-the-top kind of, used to call it hyper-detailed comics and stuff like that. And I know that's not the norm these days. And this artistically is a little more along the lines of maybe a Walking Dead type thing, or a lot of the stuff that's more, what is in vogue today, which immediately, for me, makes it a little less, makes it less likely that I would have been into it. But it actually is still really solid. It's got that, I don't know, there's just something about it. It actually harkens back in my mind to kind of some of the horror comic stuff that I like. And so like here's a couple of pages, just, it's very moody. It's dark without being overly so. And it's just a well rendered comic with good storytelling. The storytelling in it is really rock solid. So, yeah, here's like a little bit more of this stuff. And the main character here, this guy named Cade, super cool character. There are some lines of dialogue in it that just, it just made me, so stoked. So anyway, there's issue number 1. It's a 4-issue series. Okay, here's issue number 1, Warlords of Appalachia. And then here's number 2. Okay. And it's dark cover on it, so it's picking up glare really easily. Let me tilt that a bit. And here's 3. Let's see. Now, these are not small comics either. They're packed. I mean, I didn't check how many pages are in them, but these things they're solid. I mean, they're actually, you're getting some bang for your buck with each issue of this. I know that's a weird thing to talk about, but I dig that. I like the idea that I'm actually getting a lot there. I love the cover on this one, if you can see it there. Because right there it has the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Because technically, folks, Kentucky's not a state. It's a Commonwealth. There's a difference. Look it up. And they have the state flag there, the Commonwealth flag, I should say. And it's just so cool. I love that. Love that so much. There's it's an amazing comic. Oh man. Yeah, there's a line of dialogue in it that I wanted to share that I just love, is when Cade says to basically the president, when you sent this man to our mountain and pointed his gun at us, you as good as buried him in Kentucky soil. That just sends chills down my spine. I love it. It's so good. So anyway, there you go. Harlem Buck Freesword, Warlords of Appalachia. And so that sound in the background is my dogs freaking out at something. So that means it's time for me to go. So, but I hope you dig these and give them a shot. And maybe I'll do some more of these reviews. So later.